Thank you guys so much for joining us today. Our first song for today is I'm Gonna Sing, Sing, Sing. I'm gonna sing, sing, sing.
I'm gonna shout, shout, shout. I'm gonna sing, I'm gonna shout. Praise the Lord.
When those gates are open wide, I'm gonna sit at Jesus' side. I'm gonna sing, I'm gonna shout, praise the Lord. When those saints go marching in, oh, when those saints go marching in, oh, Lord, I want to be in that number. Oh, when those saints go marching in, swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. This train is bound for glory. This train is bound for glory. This train is bound for glory. Come on board.
I'll tell you a story.
This train is bound for glory. This train. I'm gonna sing, sing, sing. I'm gonna
Shout, shout, shout.
I'm gonna sing. I'm gonna shout. Praise the Lord. When those gates are open wide, I'm gonna sit at Jesus' side. I'm gonna sing. I'm gonna shout. Praise the Lord. All that singing should make us happy. So if you're happy, let's sing. If you're happy and you know it. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, then your life will surely show it. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, stomp your feet. If you're happy and you know it, stomp your feet. If you're happy and you know it, then your life will surely show it. If you're happy and you know it, stomp your feet. If you're happy and you know it, greet a friend.
Hi, friend.
If you're happy and you know it, greet a friend.
Hi, friend.
If you're happy and you know it, then your life will surely show it. If you're happy and you know it, greet a friend.
Hi, friend.
If you're happy and you know it, say amen.
Amen.
If you're happy and you know it, say amen.
Amen.
If you're happy and you know it, then your life will surely show it. If you're happy and you know it, say amen.
Amen.
If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, then your life will surely show it. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands.
Since we are so happy, we will always have fire inside of us. So let's sing Give Me Oil in My Lamp.
Give me oil in my lamp, keep me burning. Give me oil in my lamp, I pray. Give me oil in my lamp, keep me burning. Keep me burning till the break of day. Sing Hosanna, sing Hosanna, sing Hosanna to the King of Kings. Sing Hosanna, sing Hosanna, sing Hosanna to the King of Kings. Make me fisher of men, keep me seeking. Make me fisher of men, I pray. Make me fisher of men, keep me seeking. Keep me seeking till the break of day. Sing Hosanna, sing Hosanna, sing Hosanna to the King of Kings. Sing Hosanna, sing Hosanna, sing Hosanna to the King of Kings.
If we are full of that oil, it will help us to be full of joy. So let's sing I've got the joy joy, joy, joy.
The peace that passes understanding down in my heart. Down in my heart. Where? Down in my heart. I have the peace that passes understanding down in my heart. Where? Down in my heart to stay. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I have the love of Jesus in my heart. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I have the love of Jesus in my heart. I have the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Down in my heart. Down in my heart. I have the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Down in my heart to stay. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I have the love of Jesus in my heart. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I have the love of Jesus in my heart. Thank you guys so much for singing with us. Let's see what's next. Bye.
Bye.
Hi. We're going to talk a little bit about what it is to be a friend. Now, what kind of things do you think would be good for a friendship? What's it to be a good friend?
Being helpful, playing with someone. Oh, and sticking up for someone. I have a story about someone who sticked up for someone and was very nice from school. So we're gonna call them Jack and Jill. So one day, Jack was playing with some of his friends that were boys. And then Jill came over and wanted to play. Then Jack's friends that were boys said, "You can't play, Jill, because you're a girl. Only boys can play."
Oh.
So then Jack said, "No, I'm not playing if you don't let Jill play." So he standed up for Jill.
Well, even though it was kind of unpopular too. What if he felt embarrassed around his other friends that were boys and were like, "Oh, I can't be friends with Jill because then my other friends won't be my friend," right? Did Jack do that? No, he stood up for Jill and went to play with her. We have a story about something similar to that in the Bible, about a man named Nicodemus. Maybe we should call him Nick for this story. So here I made Nick from our craft. Remember when we made our friend Jesus in our craft? And Nick, oh, he was a popular, influential guy. He knew a lot about the scrolls. What were the scrolls?
The Bible back then.
Yeah, it was like the Bible, the book of, and he knew that there was going to be a Messiah coming. And you can see he's very important because in those times, if you wore purple and gold, that was a very important thing. So here's Nicodemus. He's very important. And here are some very important friends. And he's like, "Oh, well, I've heard of this man, Jesus. Jesus seems really cool."
We don't like Jesus. We don't like that Jesus heals people and all that.
And they didn't like that Jesus had power and that maybe he was the Messiah and people followed him. So here's Jesus. Oh, Nicodemus really wanted to be Jesus's friend. So he was a little bit, he didn't know what to do. So he waited until it was dark. And his friends weren't around and they might have been sleeping. So it was dark. No one could see. So Nicodemus went out and he found Jesus. And he's like, "Oh, Jesus, I studied. What would it be like? And Jesus said he wants to love everybody. He's friends with everybody." And Nicodemus is like, "I've studied these scrolls. You are the Messiah." And he was Jesus' secret friend when he went out in the dark, but later he stood by Jesus. Even when his friends may not have thought it was the best thing and they didn't always like Jesus, Nicodemus did the unpopular thing and the good friend, and he was friends with Jesus no matter what. So, being a good friend is sticking by people even if other people are making fun of them, don't like what they're wearing, don't like what they're doing. You can still be a good friend. And the friend that we always have is Jesus. Do you all know that song? What a friend we have in Jesus. Just remember that, and you have a happy Sabbath.
Hey boys and girls, Teacher Marlene here. I'm going to teach you guys about God's 10 Commandments, the law that he gave Moses back a long time ago. We see that in our Bible on the second book in Exodus chapter 20. So first I'm going to teach you some hand motions, and then I'm going to teach you a song to go with it. And hopefully that will help you memorize those very important 10 commandments that God has for us, okay? So, the first commandment is about having no other God but our one true God in heaven. So you do the number 1 and you point up to God in heaven, okay? The second commandment, you're going to do 2 with one finger in each hand. You're going to face each other, and one finger is going to bow to the other one, because the second commandment talks about not bowing down to idols. Now the third commandment, you're going to do 3 like a word, right? In sign language, this is a W for word. You put it in front of your mouth because you're not supposed to say any bad words, or you're not supposed to take God's name in vain. So you got to be careful with your words, okay? Now, the fourth commandment, you're actually going to do 2 and 2. 2 plus 2 is 4, right? And you make a little house or a little church, because the fourth commandment tells us to keep the Sabbath. And that's when we go to church and we worship God and we spend all day praising him and thinking about him, right? So 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, make a little church. Fourth commandment, you keep the Sabbath holy. Now, fifth commandment, here comes another sign language. Mom and dad. So commandment number 5 is about honoring your mother and your father, okay? Now, the 6th commandment, this is kind of like a knife that you're stabbing someone. It says you shouldn't kill, okay? Commandment number 6, don't kill. Okay, 7, you gotta do a little bendy work. So you get these 2 fingers and you kind of bend them, or you could do it the other way around if you want to be more accurate. 2 fingers, and it's like a ring, and you're putting it on your finger, okay? So commandment number 7 is to not commit adultery. So husband and wife, you're married for a life, and you need to be faithful to each other, okay? That's 7. Now, the 8th commandment, this hand is going to try to steal those 3. 8th commandment, do not steal, okay? Now, commandment number 9, if you've ever watched anything or seen anything about when you go to court and they have you put your hand on the Bible and put one hand up, and you have to swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So you're kind of putting your 4 down like you're putting it on the Bible, and you're putting your other 5 up. 5 and 4 is 9, right? Commandment number 9, tell the truth, not lie, okay? And then comes 10. 10, again, this in sign language is to like give me. This is to not want anything that doesn't belong to you. Do not covet. Do not want to take anything that's not yours. So that's the sign language for the 10 commandments, using the numbers so that you can remember. Now, let's use that and put it to a song so it can be even easier to remember, okay? It goes like this. The first commandment is easy, you see. God said, have no gods but me. The second commandment is very vital. God said, don't you make any idols. Third commandment tells tongues to refrain. Never take God's name in vain. Fourth commandment, they better not shirk. Keep the Sabbath holy and do no work. Fifth commandment about mother and dad. Give them honor, don't treat them bad. Shall not kill is commandment number 6. Do not murder is what God demands. Commit no adultery on your husband or wife, 'cause when you're married for life. Eighth commandment is a very big deal. It tells everyone they better not steal. Never tell a lie is commandment number 9. If you always tell the truth, you'll be just fine. The very last commandment is commandment number 10. Do not covet, for it is sin. I hope you can practice that, and then you can remember all of God's 10 very important commandments for us. And just as a side note, I did not come up with all of this on my own. I got ideas off of the internet and put it all together and added a little bit of my own style. All right, boys and girls, good to see you. Bye.
Hi everyone, it's Aunt Fernita. Today's story is called, What Is It? The memory verse is from Isaiah chapter 58, verses 13 and 14. If you call the Sabbath a delight, you will find your joy in the Lord. Today's message is we worship God when we enjoy keeping the Sabbath. Do you know what a desert is like? It is hot during the day and cold at night, with all the sand and little or nothing growing. Where could you find food in a desert? The Israelites traveled in the desert and they were almost out of food. What do you think they did? God took such good care of the Israelites. He sent a cloud to shade them from the hot desert sun in the day. He sent a pillar of fire at night to light their camp. He had freed them from Egypt and destroyed their enemies in the Red Sea. But the Israelites were beginning to worry. It had been 6 weeks since God had led them out of Egypt, and the food they had brought with them was almost gone. Back in Egypt, we had all the food we could eat, they grumbled. But here in this desert, we're going to starve to death. They complained bitterly to Moses. Of course, God had no intention of letting them starve to death. I will rain down bread from heaven, God told Moses. It will be there in the morning. The people are to go out every day and gather an omer each, but they must not keep any of it until the next day. I am going to test them to see if they follow my instructions. Sure enough, the next morning the ground was covered with thin white flakes. The people were surprised. What is it? They asked, again and again. It looked like frozen dew all over the ground. This is the bread God promised you. Gather it and eat it today, but don't try to keep any for tomorrow. It won't be good. So the people called it manna, which means, what is it? They gathered it up and tasted it. It tasted sweet like honey, and there was enough for everyone. But as soon as the sun grew hot, the manna that remained on the ground melted away. Some people gathered a lot. Some people gathered a little. All the people had just what they needed regardless of how much they gathered. Don't keep any of it until the next morning, God had said. But some of them paid no attention. The next morning, their leftover manna was full of worms and smelled bad. On the 6th day, the instruction was different. Today, you're going to gather twice as much, Moses said. Tomorrow is God's Sabbath, a day of rest. There won't be any manna on the ground in the morning. So get enough for today and bake it or boil it, but save some of it for tomorrow. The double portion they were told to gather to keep for Sabbath would not get wormy. But wouldn't you know, some people didn't gather twice as much that Friday. Instead, they got up on Sabbath morning expecting to find manna. They had to learn their lesson the hard, hungry way. Of course, there was no manna on the ground that Sabbath morning, and there was none on any Sabbath that came after. How long will they refuse to follow my instructions? God sighed to Moses. The story of the manna teaches us two things. First, just like the Israelites, we honor God when we obey Him. Following His directions is an act of worship. It also teaches us that God knows best. His plans for us are for our own good. Following His instructions is the only way to really be happy. It took the Israelites a while to learn that they needed to follow God's instructions about the manna. They finally got it right. And it's a good thing, because that's what God fed them for the 40 years they spent in the wilderness. They also learned how important the Sabbath is to God. He wanted them and us to make it a special day, different from other days. When they kept the Sabbath special, when they didn't work by gathering manna, they were showing God their love and obedience, and they were really worshiping Him.
Created and produced by Falvo Fowler. This podcast is read by Franita Buddy Fullwood for Gracelink.net. Animation and artwork by Giogo Godoy. Audio is post-produced by Faith To at Studio El Piso in Singapore. The theme music is by Clayton Kinney. The audio engineer was Maurice Bailey.